You know, I've been playing Team Fortress 2 for a really long time. I've been playing it for 15 years. I first played it when I was just 8 years old, and I've been playing it ever since. And to this day, I'm not even slightly bored of it. And I thought to myself, why is that? How's this game managed to captivate me for such a long time? I kept trying to figure it out, why I'm enjoying it after all these years. I sat for a solid hour wondering why. And then, on yet another game of Badwater, it hit me. Bam! You see that? You see how cool that was? None of that play could have happened without the movement. It's the movement. Look at how fast I'm going. These idiots never saw it coming. I've been making videos for over 3.5 years talking about game design for all that time. All this complex stuff about what makes a game fun. But under the surface, I'm a simple man. All I want in my games is cool movement, satisfying movement options, conceptually simple but with tons of depth that requires dedication to master, and preferably, you go really fast. And when I thought about it for a little longer, I realised that so many of my favourite games of all time have this one thing in common. They all just have really cool movement. So just to prove it, I want to go over what makes such a good movement system, why it works, why it's engaging, and why, when you boil it down to it, it's all I ever want from a game. I don't really know how to segue into this next part, so Market Gardener segue. There are 5 core elements that are vital to making a good movement system that feels engaging to play with, and only when all 5 of these things come together in perfect harmony do you get games like these. And the first element is the one that might seem obvious to some of you, but you'd be surprised how many games mess this part up. The movement system needs to be important. It needs to be integral to your success as a player. If you don't move fast in Ultrakill, you will be eviscerated by the endless barrage of bullets and explosives heading your way. If you can't rocket jump, you and your team will be completely annihilated by soldier players that can. If you can't wave dash, you will be crushed by an opponent that schmoves all over the stage. These movement systems are vital to your success, and mastery of the movement system is a huge step towards mastery of the game itself. There's no point in having cool movement tech if the player never really needs to use most of it. Look, Rainworld, I'm sorry. I love you. You know I love you. But there is so much movement tech in this game, and the overwhelming majority of it is just completely irrelevant. There is a Google Doc that details all of the movement tech in this game, and it is 87 pages long. 87 pages! The movement system in this game is great, and it's really complicated, but it misses this one key element. You just don't need most of it. Whereas the same cannot be said for this. But important movement options in a game is not particularly unique. Like, take Overwatch for example. Certain characters have movement abilities that are vital to their success. You can't play Pharah without using your jumps and your hover. You just won't be nearly effective enough without them. But there is a reason that Overwatch's movement is widely considered to be, well, shit. And to explain why this is the case, let me give you a tour of the best movement system ever devised. I will now perform a rocket jump in the Fortress 2 video game 2007. First off, I slightly walk forward. I must aim my rocket launcher slightly behind me, then jump, crouch, and shoot the ground all at the same time to propel myself into the air. If I want to go higher or further, I have to shoot an extra rocket at the wall while I'm airborne, meaning I have to align myself with the wall and stick to it while I fly through the air. I have to also make sure not to press W in the air, else I will remove my ability to turn while airborne. I fly gracefully through the sky, and after a short trip, I land on the ground and hit this idiot with a shovel. I have now successfully rocket jumped in the best game ever made. I will now demonstrate how to rocket jump in Overwatch. I press shift. I just press shift. It was so boring. A good movement system needs to be skill-based. And if you ask me, the higher the skill ceiling, the better. Because an extremely powerful movement option being available at the click of a button isn't nearly as satisfying or exciting for nearly as long as that same movement option being a skill that you have to learn and master. But that doesn't mean your movement has to be overly complicated. Dashing and sliding are both available at the press of a single button in Ultrakill. If you jump slightly after dashing, you can carry that momentum with you to go even faster. And you can do the same thing with slides. And your ability to aim while moving quickly factors into it too. All of this adds up to make a movement system that is very simple, yet still requires true mastery to be used to its full potential. And this is something that Overwatch's movement just thoroughly lacks. Even the most skill-expressive movement in the entire game still pales in comparison to jumping, crouching, and shooting the floor. A movement system is nothing without being able to hone it as a skill. But all of this getting good at going fast is nothing without an exciting environment to do it in. The third key element is level design. Celeste has very simple mechanics. You have a dash, a jump, and a wall climb. But it's how the levels force you to use these mechanics that makes its movement so special. It demands you use your resources in a clever way to reach the end of the level, and it never stops forcing you to use everything at your disposal to succeed. And when the levels get harder, they start adding in the more complicated movement stuff like the wave dashing and the wall bouncing. But they use it in this same way, forcing you to use the new tool that you have to offer. And you start looking back at older, easier levels and seeing new paths that you didn't see before using this new movement tech, because the levels are designed with these crazy movement options in mind, even when you as a player didn't know that they were possible. If the game has very fast horizontal movement, then the levels will reflect that. If its vertical movement is where it's at, then the levels will be tall with lots of height variation. If the game has both, then the levels should factor that in. And the better the developer understands their movement system, the better the maps can be for incentivizing movement. The original TF2 maps are terrible for movement. In fact, they're just terrible in general, really. But as the game got older and wiser, more maps got added that really incentivized you to go fast, with slopes and ramps placed in all the right spots to allow soldiers and demos this crazy freedom that Dust Bowl just won't allow. You see all these spots on newer maps that you can do cool jumps from, but the only thing I can achieve in this hallway is bashing my fucking head into the ceiling. The level design needs to accentuate the movement system and allow it to flourish, because jumping around in an empty rectangular room won't be fun for very long. And in a similar vein, jumping around these cool levels for no real reason won't be too fun either, which is why a good movement system directly interacts with the game's other mechanics. Now you see this shovel? This shovel is the most incredibly designed weapon in any video game ever made. No. Because it is the most fun and most hilarious way that the movement system directly interacts with the game's core mechanics. You see, if I rocket jump, my shovel is guaranteed to critically strike. So long as I hit someone before I hit the ground, it will deal 195 damage to them. So of course, a lot of players, including myself, spend most of their time in-game trying to insta-kill people with the funny haha shovel. Because it's perfect. It's difficult to pull off, it's extremely satisfying when you do pull it off, and it directly incentivizes good movement in a game with one of the best movement systems ever devised. But this is not where interactions with the game's mechanics end. Being able to jump on someone really fast is a great way to get a high priority pick on an enemy player, but the enemy players can interact with you too while you're jumping, in the form of air shots. And this is imperative to making the movement actually exciting to do. It needs to directly interact with the non-movement aspects of the game, otherwise it's not fun. And if it's not fun, why bother? Which is one of the reasons why you see so many platformers giving you these new mechanics every single level. Not only does it keep things fresh, but it gives these base movement mechanics a new thing to interact with, and a whole bunch of new interactions that are now possible because of the addition of this new mechanic. And these interactions don't have to be huge or groundbreaking. Something as simple as aiming while moving or platforming over gaps will suffice. But without this, there's no purpose to the movement, and without purpose, the movement becomes stale really fast. But even if your movement system has all of these elements baked in perfectly, there's still one more thing you need, because it still isn't going to be fun to use the same technique over and over again for hours and hours of playtime. A good movement system needs layers, because rocket jumping is as easy as 1, 2, 3. But there's also C-tapping, sinks, wall climbing, wall pogo, speed shots, market gardening, the list just keeps going on. If the most I could do was go up and down in a straight line, then it wouldn't be all that fun for all that long. Same goes with most other games too. There's just a dash and a climb, but I also have these additional movement options for when those things get too easy or too boring. There needs to be layers, not only to keep people interested in the long term, but also to make it easy for any player of any skill level to at least have something that they can do. Because maybe they won't be able to do all this complicated stuff, but at least they'll have something they can get away with. And this doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be extremely difficult or extremely overcomplicated. It just needs some depth. It needs to have something beneath the surface. Something to make sure you've not already seen everything the game has to offer within the first 20 minutes. And only when you assemble all 5 of these elements together do you get a movement system that really stands the test of time. Missing any one of these means missing a huge chunk of the excitement and replayability of some of the best movement systems out there. And when you find yourself playing a game with movement that just really feels lackluster, chances are they're missing one of these sparks. Or in some cases, most of these sparks. Thanks for watching.